setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen. Izzo's dying for a moving screen.
It's that dreaded moving screen.
Welcome, everybody, to the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn from The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhart of umhoops.com. A lot to unpack today. It is Monday, January 13th. Michigan coming off a 8-point loss at Minnesota. Michigan State coming off a 29-point loss at Purdue. Dylan, it was a rough times for the brand here.
It was. In the Big Ten, I think you're only as good as wherever you played your last game.
Hell of a good.
You play on the road at a place like Mackey or Williams Arena, you're not going to think you're very good on Monday, and that's kind of how it goes, and that's how it's gone across the whole league this year.
Had you been to the barn before?
Yes.
You had? Okay.
I missed the old seats on the little bench hanging over the ledge, but I have been there. It wasn't the most intimidating venue, at least on Sunday after a disappointing playoff loss for the city of Minneapolis,
right.
I would say.
Right. It can be one of the best places to see a game. But yeah, the new media seating's brutal. Up in the corner of the
it is not great.
Planet. Yeah, awful. But I was in West Lafayette. Dylan was in Minneapolis, so we kind of have all angles covered here. Some quick business. If you are not subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe so you always get the latest episodes. If you'd be so kind to leave a review, that helps us a great deal. Find new listeners. We are a very niche podcast, so any new listeners we can find is appreciated. Dylan, what do you have on UM Hoops this week that people should be looking forward to reading? And if they're not subscribed, they should subscribe to read.
Yeah, so subscribe to UM Hoops. We will have a lot this week digging into Michigan's defense, what's wrong with Michigan's defense, a lot to unpack there. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my newsletter also. It's dylanburkhart.substack.com. You can sign up there and get on board, and then you don't even have to buy anything. You can just get some free Big Ten content along the way.
I can vouch that the newsletter's great. I've been enjoying it. On The Athletic this week, I obviously have my recap from yesterday. Have some stuff planning. I'm not exactly sure when it's going to drop, but some projects are on the way. So kind of the bigger, longer form stuff that I prefer doing. So that's coming eventually. Just hang tight. And also, there was something else I wanted to plug. The hell was it? Oh, if you haven't subscribed to my other podcast, myself and Nick Baumgartner have a pod via The Athletic called The Beat. We do weekly interviews. Sometimes we just shoot the shit, have a good time. But now that it's basketball season, for those of you who are inclined to like this podcast, we are very basketball heavy right now. Last week we had Dan Dockich on. Tomorrow we will be sitting down with Josh Bartelstein. So there's a lot of good stuff coming, and it's we try to keep it from being a pretty straightforward interview pod. It is lots of laughing and storytelling, so that's kind of what we do. So if you're interested in that, find The Beat on iTunes. You can listen to the first half of every episode for free. If you want the full episode, make sure you subscribe to The Athletic, and you can get it through the app. Okay, that's that. Dylan, we're going to start with Michigan-Minnesota because it was a much better game. I feel like there's kind of more to draw from it than Michigan State just kind of getting run at Purdue. So you were there. I have lots of thoughts. I watched the game this morning, but I want to kind of pick your brain on this and see what you're thinking.
Yeah, so I think you start and you look at the fact that it was a game Michigan probably played well enough to win. And there's going to be road games where you don't play well enough to win, or the other team plays so well that you can't win. Take the Michigan State at Purdue game, right? Sometimes everything just goes wrong in the first 10 minutes and you're basically drawing dead. There's going to be road games like that in the Big Ten. It's when you have the games that are right there that you can win. Your offense plays really well. So those are the games that you just have to win, right? If you have the chances, and it just stings to let that slip away down the stretch like Michigan did.
Yeah, I mean, so 10 for 28 on threes, but I mean, they had great looks. Some of their threes were just wide open. I think of Eli Brooks in the corner a number of times. I mean, just you're not going to get better looks than that. DeJulius missed a couple good looks. Simpson missed a couple wide open shots. And you're like, yeah, okay, you make 10 threes, it's pretty good, but they missed a number of great opportunities, I feel like, on the offensive end. And then, defensively, everyone's going to talk about the same thing here, so we might as well get into it.
Well, so first off, they did start, they made, I think, 6 of their first 9 threes, and then they shot, 4 of 19 from 3. But overall, Michigan's offense got whatever it wanted, and Michigan's offense played well enough to win on the road. They got a lot of back cuts and passes for easy layups. Like, the ball screen offense worked really well. Mm-hmm. So there's really nothing to complain about.
Yeah, the only thing that I would say about the offense, I agree with you. I think they certainly played well enough to win. I thought it was a good overall offensive game. I would say maybe a few more post touches for Teskey would have been perhaps preferable. I know they were doubling on him and stuff like that, and there's a rationale for it. Obviously, Michigan would love to get Teskey post touches. That's one of their, if not their number one go-to. But if you wanted to really nitpick, I'd say maybe they could have found him a little bit more.
Yeah, they went to him in the final 4 minutes when they absolutely needed a basket, and he missed. Right. So I maybe you would do more of that, but I look at it in this sense. In the end, Michigan lost the game because its offense fell flat on a couple possessions. But there was really no need. If the defense had played better, there would have been no need for the offense to score on every single one of those possessions down the stretch.
Agreed.
So it was the defense in the first 35 minutes and the final 5 minutes, but that doesn't really apply to the offense as much, in my opinion, right? Like, the offense did its job for the most part. And if you're going to say that your offense has to score every possession down the stretch on the road, you're probably not going to win. So I think we have to look more and take a look at the defense and what went wrong on that side of the ball.
I think it's worth underlining something that you just said, though, that for the offense not having a good day, there were a lot of key possessions that came up empty, where guys just missed shots, or guys missed the ball. I think of the one late in the first half when things were kind of unraveling and they were kind of fumbling away what was a really well-earned lead. Eli Brooks just missed like a bunny with 2 minutes left in the half. It was kind of an inexplicable shot that he's probably would make 99 out of 100 times. Then on the other end, John Teskey did a great job of fronting the post. He prevented a touch for Oturu. Oturu proceeds to just walk out to the three-point line, gets the ball there instead, backs up Teskey all the way into a post-up, gets him alone, spins for a layup. It's 31-28. And, that lead just kept evaporating.
Yeah, and you look at Eli Brooks, kind of during the slump, I feel like he's had a hard time getting a lot of really good looks. Michigan State, Purdue, he didn't have a lot of clean looks. He was forcing tougher looks. He had a lot of wide open threes, and they just weren't falling until that last one he finally made.
Right, to get the lead, which is maybe the biggest shot of the day for Michigan.
So the shooting in that sense, yeah, but I don't know. You just say the shots didn't go in. I don't know what you can really say or do to change that, right? On the defensive side, though, I think there are issues for Michigan, and I don't know really what the solutions are. At this point, through 5 games, Michigan is last in the Big Ten in points allowed per possession at 1.12. That's not a good number. And there's, I think, a lot wrong with this defense right now.
Do we want to talk about post defense?
So I think we can start there. I also think that's a symptom more than a root cause, if that makes sense.
Okay, well, let's get into it.
All right. So Michigan's post-up defense has been bad all this year. I think people probably have followed that. Orion tweeted a great stat yesterday that Michigan's allowing 29 points a game or something like that to Big Ten centers. which is pretty incredible. It's only 5 games, and they have played most of the better centers in the Big Ten already. But Michigan, as we've discussed, has decided to single cover the post, and teams have scored pretty efficiently through, around, and above John Teskey in Big Ten games. I
mean, here's the thing. It's like you're deciding to play single coverage in a year that is like historically good for Big Ten bigs. I don't know if maybe some other years this would work out a little bit differently, but you have legitimate scoring big men in this conference, in an era where the post big is a dying breed. The Big Ten randomly has them all over the place this year. And Oturu is a different animal because he can get you out on the post and go off the bounce and try to drive past you. He even hit a couple 1-3, I think he hit. Late in the shot clock, it was a big shot early when Michigan was kind of stretching his lead. They were up 9, and he banged one with like 1 second left in the shot clock. But, I do get it analytically that, 2s are better than 3s. You're kind of better off just letting teams kind of use that instead of trying to run on you or shoot 3s or whatever it might be. But, Minnesota went 17 for 21 on layups and scored 46 points in the paint. They went 4 for 16 or whatever it was on 3s, but still scored 1.2 points per possession. That plan did not work. So I think teams know exactly what they're scouting for against Michigan. And I'm not saying you need to throw 2 doubles or true doubles. I'm not saying you need to trap every time. I'm not saying you need to send someone to cheat every time. But, I think you need to start doing something sometimes to at least... teams are just way too comfortable playing against Michigan's defense right now.
Yeah, so I agree with all that. I think changing something up is the obvious answer. You can't just let teams walk the ball and score. I also think that it's a little more complicated than that as far as I don't think Michigan's defense lost the game with the inability to guard Oturu. I think the inability to guard Marcus Carr and prevent dribble penetration was almost a bigger issue. And I look at it like this. If you look at Michigan's defensive philosophy, which, to be very clear, this is the same philosophy that Michigan had last year. Michigan didn't double the post last year. Michigan didn't allow assisted shots. It's the same thing. It's the same plan. The results have not been the same. So the second year in a row, Michigan's going to be one of the top teams in the country and not allowing assisted field goals. Just last year's team held teams to 44% 2-point shooting, and this year's team is allowing 47% 2-point shooting and 54% in the Big Ten. So the playing defense like this, where basically you're not going to overhelp against any sort of action, right? You're going to try to contain the individual offensive player into a situation where they have to score through your defender. Whether that's a post-up, whether that's a ball screen, Michigan does not overhelp, right? Because they're not going to allow you to get in the lane and then kick out to a spot-up shooter. Jordan Sperber tweeted a great stat that Michigan leads the country in the fewest percentage of spot-up possessions allowed per game, which is basically catch and shoot, catch and drive. Michigan doesn't give up any of that, sort of like the anti-zone.
Right.
The problem is that when you play this way, you have to be able to, 1 through 5, guard your man and keep him out of the paint, keep him out of the lane one-on-one. And this Michigan team has not been as good as last year's Michigan team at doing exactly that. Now, Charles Matthews plays a part, but John Teskey was much better guarding the post last year, even 2 months ago. So is it I don't have a hard time reconciling why that happens. Xavier Simpson has been better. Obviously, he's playing a larger offensive load. And then I think at the 4, you really lose a lot of being able to guard your man. And I think Franz has also struggled at times to contain his man one-on-one, especially when it's a bigger, stronger player, which we saw down the stretch against Minnesota.
Right, which brings up that small ball lineup that everyone loves to talk about. Well, if the other team is not playing a small ball lineup, yes, Michigan can get some, but it puts Franz Wagner in a bind, and you saw it What's the kid's name? Alahan Demar?
Yeah, Demir. Not sure exactly.
It's from Turkey, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the Drexel transfer. He, the first second they went, or right when they went to the small ball lineup with like 3 minutes left in the game or something like that, Wagner moved to the 4. He was on him, just went right at him, right through his chest.
Yeah, and then
for a layup with, I think, like 2 minutes left. Gave them a 3-point lead.
So they went to the small lineup, I think closer to like 6 minutes left.
Okay.
And they did go right at Franz, but Franz also hit a 3 right away, which is sort of the trade-off that you want to get out of that look. But yeah, he did struggle they did attack that really well, better than a team like Purdue did when Michigan played it. At the same time, I have a hard time with the small lineup because if you're confident enough in it that you want to close games with it, then why are you not playing it at all in the first half of the game? Right. So that's a whole rotational question that we can probably get into. But just going back to the defense, if Michigan can't contain dribble penetration, it's a big problem. And I don't know what the fix is for that really, except just getting better to a man 1 through 5 in terms of guarding the ball.
Agreed. And yeah, and I it's so tough because we don't, they are without Isaiah Livers, and we haven't even mentioned that caveat yet,
which is key.
But they went 15 for 23 in the second half. Minnesota got whatever it wanted down the stretch in that game, and really the final score could have been worse because they went 13 for 22 on free throws in the second half. So
Marcus Carr, I swear it looked like Richard Pitino was just going to lose his mind at him about halfway through the first half because he wasn't playing any defense. He was just like Pitino was losing his mind.
He jacked a few too.
And then all of a sudden, Carr dominated the game for the final 30 minutes. So whatever Richard Pitino said there, kudos to him because it was a complete 180 as far as his composure. And then he just really put his whole mark on the game. And Michigan had no answer for him. He was really good going against that drop coverage, and he would kind of patiently get in the lane and then make the right play. He would score over John Teskey, and then the moment John Teskey would come a little too close to him, he found Oturu for a lob. So he was really good.
He outplayed Xavier Simpson on a day where I think Xavier Simpson was actually pretty darn good.
Yeah, he did. He didn't even have a turnover, and that's another thing that is probably worth talking about this Michigan defense. They're not making life any easier on themselves by doing something else other than just forcing tough shots. So they're 12th in the Big Ten in defensive rebounding rate, 12th in free throw rate allowed, and 12th in turnover rate. So they're not forcing turnovers, they're not cleaning up the defensive glass, and they're giving up way too many free throws. I think the fouling especially is an issue that is new, right? Michigan teams under John Beilein never fouled. And I don't know what the secret sauce is to that, whether it's practicing something or emphasizing something, but it's been an issue for this Michigan team, and it was a big issue on the road at Minnesota. Well, they gave up a lot of free throws.
And some of it is personnel. Franz Wagner's going to foul a lot. I think John Teskey is fouling more because of the situation that he's in. Brandon Johns is still kind of, can get lost a little bit on defense. Seems like he's always in recovery, Brandon Johns. So he's going to be prone to foul. Austin Davis is playing minutes, and Austin Davis is going to use his fouls when he's in there. Colin Castleton, I don't think had any yesterday, but, he's prone to overplaying or, just doing something that. And then Adrian Nunez, if you get beat off the bounce, you're probably going to foul a guy here and there. So a lot of it is the rotation. And one of the reasons that Beilein's teams didn't foul is because he really never played more than 7 guys. And the only guys that he played, he trusted that they wouldn't foul.
Yeah, and it's just an area where I think Michigan has to improve. They are not in the defensive glass are big issues that could submarine not the whole season, but like how good this team wants to be. On the other hand, I think we need to point out Michigan has played the toughest schedule in the Big Ten.
Good point.
They played 5 of the top 6 offensive rebounding teams. Now you could say, are those the top offensive rebounding teams because they played Michigan? Maybe, but they've played teams that are really good on the glass. Their 5 KenPom games have been against the 5th, 16th, 19th, 29th, and 38th ranked teams in the country, and 3 have been away from home. So we're saying all this about how bad Michigan's defensive numbers look, but you do have to point out just how difficult the schedule's been. Obviously, there's a lot of tough games in the Big Ten, but Michigan hasn't had anything really close to resembling a straightforward game, I would say, at this point.
Right. So they've already, but let's look at the bigs, right? So they've already gone against Travion Williams, Xavier Tillman, Kofi Coburn, Luka Garza, and now Daniel Oturu. Beast, all of them, right? And what did you say it was 29 points per Orion that those guys are averaging, which is insane. Well, there's still more down the pike, right? Like, it's not like that's it. They still got to go against Caleb Wesson. Still got to go against Jalen Smith. Still got to go against, who am I forgetting? Trace Jackson Davis, Mike Watkins.
We're gonna
your boy,
little Nate Reavers.
Reavers.
Reavers. But so
Miles Johnson. Don't forget Miles Johnson.
Either way, I think that schedule adds a little context. Just how difficult they've played early on. And then it doesn't get easier. They go on the road on Friday, so against a big man who scored 44 points in their own gym. So it is going to be interesting if they make adjustments. But I think that the cracks in the ball screen defense and the ability to contain dribble penetration are maybe just as concerning long-term as the post-ups, despite the fact that like a post-up is just the most obvious thing. And if everyone feels like it's the most obvious solution, I feel like it's a little more nuanced, right?
Oh, of course.
Everyone's like, you just look at it and you see the guy score, and it feels like there's that extra timing that it kind of takes to build into the play. And you're like, well, obviously you should double and he'd never score. I could have told you that when he caught the ball. And it's easy to say. It would help. I don't know what the answer is and how that affects everything else.
I even feel like in the past, and you, correct me if I'm wrong, you would definitely know better. Like, I do feel like even under Beeline, when they wouldn't double, they wouldn't, go with a trap, like, they'd still send maybe someone just to try to get someone a little uncomfortable. Just cheat down, throw a hand at him just so that the guy maybe kicks it back out of the post. It just didn't seem to me like guys were being put on quite an island like Teskey is right now. Am I misremembering?
I feel like, sometimes you'll dig into the post, and Michigan even did that a few times, but it's not really, it wasn't done with much
vigor.
It never really looked like it was done, but it was just sort of going through the motions, right? It didn't impact.
It looked like a jab. It looked like a jab step, right?
Yeah, and if you don't even come close enough to come into his vision, like, is it really doing anything? Right. So that's probably an area they could improve. I think the only guy who's any good at that on Michigan's roster right now is Franz, because he has pretty good hands and can get steals and stuff like that. But we talked all the time last year about how much Michigan emphasized one-on-one play, whether it was in the post or on the perimeter. And that's the same mission statement or whatever, the same core belief that is going into this defense, without a doubt. Teskey just played better defense. We talked about it as a good thing in November when Teskey dominated Gonzaga. Right? Like, that was a thing that happened. We talked how well he walled up those big men. Petrusev had 9 points on 3 of 16 shooting. Right? That's like a great big man. One of the best in the country. And Teskey just shut him out.
So what do you think it is? Like, why do you...
I don't know. I am not like an expert on the angles and of post defense,
because it doesn't seem like it's like one or two specific things that are getting him right. It's not like we could obviously chart it out like what all these baskets are. Guys going to their right or guys going to their left, or which side of the lane, or spins in which direction and things like that. But I don't know if there's any trend. And there's nothing that jumps to mind, at least.
No, and that's what I think makes it hard. Because if you're trying to make your game plan and you're like, well, when we played our best, this is what we did. When we played our worst, we did the same thing. So what should we do? And is it you don't want to overreact, but you don't want to underreact and keep doing the same thing if it means that your defense is going to unravel. I do think that Isaiah Livers makes an impact just as far as defensive communication, dealing with different kind of mismatches at the 4. And that is an underlying issue with this group right now, that you can't really – it's easy to forget about because we've just been talking about this team without Isaiah Livers for 2 weeks.
Right.
But he's not a lockdown defender, but he doesn't – you don't have to hedge a 1-4 ball screen. You don't have to do all these different things that you're doing at times now that create more defensive issues.
Well, and it also bears noting, we're having this whole conversation without mentioning the fact that this same team did just beat Purdue in a double overtime game. That Purdue team just went and waxed Michigan State. So the league is wonky. Playing on the road is brutal. I mean, that Purdue game, people were feeling pretty good coming out of that, you know?
That Purdue game was a game that you had to have.
Yeah.
If Michigan loses that game, which it had to defend for its life on back-to-back end of period possessions that could have won the game. I mean, that's a tough spot to be in.
Especially when you're in survival mode without Livers, right? Like you're just trying to get through this stretch without torpedoing your year, right?
Yeah, because then you're going on the road again
Right.
on Friday. That it's just a really tough stretch. Here's the thing, though, I would say, is if Isaiah Livers comes back, whenever he comes back, and if Michigan were to get hot, it could work really nicely because there will be a perception as far as Michigan's evaluated that
True.
Livers makes them that much better, right? Even though the gist of it could just be that it's a much more difficult stretch of schedule, right? Like this is the most difficult Big Ten stretch of schedule that I think Michigan plays, but it will sort of change the perception because he could come back and they win at Nebraska by 20 and everyone's like, oh, Michigan's rolling again. And really, is it Isaiah Livers or the schedule? So interesting to track. And as far as the NCAA tournament committee considers injuries and things like that.
It's fair. That's a good point. I can certainly see that being the exact scenario that plays out. Assuming Isaiah Livers is back in some kind of timely.
No update on Livers. He dribbled the basketball a little bit before the game, just like casually on the side. And then Juwan Howard was asked and said that we should ask Isaiah Livers, which we have not been given the opportunity to do.
That was quite the exchange there. So, all right. Anything else on Michigan before we hop over?
I don't know. I think that was pretty good.
Okay.
Deep dive there.
There you go. Michigan State. Obviously a bad day that gradually got worse and worse in West Lafayette. Obviously one of the hardest places to play in the league. On this day, it was like it didn't seem like that kind of rocking and rolling, just crazy environment that I've seen at Mackey, in the opening tip-off. But as Purdue started to run it up on state, it got a little bloodthirsty in there, and then it started really kind of turning out, and it was the Mackey that I think people would expect. They played as well as possible. Purdue did. As I noted in the story I wrote today, right? Stefanovic comes in, he's 1 for 3 on, Bordeaux is 1 for 13 on threes this season. He starts banging threes early. He finishes 3 for 5. It was just, Harms, they didn't know if he was going to play or not. He comes in, hits 2 mid-range jump shots in his first 2 or 3 possessions on the floor. Purdue looked very different from the team that I saw in Ann Arbor a few days beforehand. And Michigan State, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Xavier Simpson, Cassius Winston was stuffed in a closet.
If Purdue played as well as it could, I think Michigan State played as poorly as it could.
That is correct.
Maybe even worse than Purdue played well.
I think there was 8 minutes left in the second half when I tweeted, Michigan State just literally needs to just get out of this building without anyone getting hurt. It is not. There is no second half run. This is not happening. This is just that. This is one of those days in the league where just get in, get out, and move on.
I mean, just turn the ball over on 30% of your possessions, shoot 13% from three.
Yeah.
Those are some ugly, ugly numbers. And I mean, to be fair, Purdue turns teams over better than any team in the Big Ten. But that was an old school Cassius Winston 9 turnover game where just nothing worked. He's had those games, but still just a little shocking to see, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that it was something Purdue? What would you attribute it to? Is it something that Purdue figured out? Is it something that they just played poorly?
I mean, Michigan State knew exactly what Purdue was going to do on their ball screens. They knew they were going to hedge hard. It would basically be, two guys on Cassius until he got rid of the ball coming out of a ball screen, right? And Michigan State, it seemed like nobody knew what they were doing. I don't know if Tillman wasn't rolling hard enough. I don't know if Cassius wasn't seeing him. I don't know. They wanted Xavier Tillman to continue to roll and not double back and go get the ball from him. They wanted him to go through and then send a guard out to give him help. But everyone was bad on this day. Nobody played well. It literally seemed like the game started and nobody told Michigan State. Defensively, there were so many miscommunications in the first 10 minutes where guys didn't know if they were switching, if they weren't switching. Purdue players were just being left wide open. There were times where there would be a dribble handoff and, one guy would kind of cut hard to the baseline. Just no one would go with him. I don't know if it was kind of a rude awakening of what it's like to play in kind of a raucous Big Ten environment, but they did play at Seton Hall, and that building was loud as hell that night. That was also 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So I think this was kind of a smack in the face of what it takes mentally. I think Michigan State was feeling really good about itself coming into this game, obviously, right? And
it was just playing at home bludgeoning team.
Exactly. And, they just beat the piss out of their rival. They're clearly playing better than anyone else in the Big Ten. And it was a rude awakening that it's good to get on film. But, I mean, it was 19-4 early on. That game was over. Because against Purdue, also, sometimes in a place like that where, and even though Michigan State came back a year ago from basically the same scenario, that 19, when it was 19-4, it felt like they were down 30.
So I'm fascinated by this Purdue team, and I don't know what to make of them, but I think you have to look at what I first look at is that Cassius Winston struggles against length, and we've seen that kind of as a trend this year. I would say Kentucky, teams that have been able to successfully blitz ball screens against Michigan State have done it with a lot of length, especially at the point of attack. That's what Kentucky did, and that's kind of, from what I watched of the game, what Purdue did, where they have a guy like Nojel Eastern who can apply some of that length and make things difficult. You agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
So is that just the solution to guarding Michigan State? Do you think everyone starts to do that, or does Michigan State have a counter? Because when Michigan forced the ball out of Winston's hands at the game at the Breslin Center, Xavier Tillman was fantastic at sort of catching it in a tough spot, getting downhill and making a play, right? Pat kicking out, his ability to play make was really, really good against Michigan, and then not necessarily materialize at Purdue. I don't know what to attribute that to, really.
I mean, I think the perfect recipe to beat Michigan State is to defend Cassius Winston this way, to completely basically eliminate Michigan State's fast break game, which Purdue did extremely well. The problem is, like, that's so hard to do. Like, the thing about this matchup is, like, this is what Purdue does. Like, this is how they defend damn near everyone, right? And it just so happens it's, like, the perfect way to go at Michigan State. So, not like other teams, I have a hard time, like, on a 2 or 3 day prep that a lot of teams can just kind of throw this package together. And, I got one of the things I wrote today was, like, if other teams could do this, they would. But, like, it's kind of a big ask to just figure out a way to do this, because if you're either not playing as hard as Purdue did and your guys don't know exactly what they're doing the way Purdue does, Michigan State will also take this way and dissect you with it, because Winston will just run circles around you. So I think a lot of it's matchup wise. I think a lot of it is Purdue being Purdue. I was more impressed by the fact that, Purdue, I asked Matt Painter after the game, what were you most pleased with about your transition defense? And his answer was perfect. It was that they weren't in transition defense. Like, for a team like Michigan State that runs on makes and misses, to just be kind of bottled into a 60 possession game, which is the exact amount that Texas Tech held that game to in the national semifinals. The lower the possessions, the worse off Michigan State is. Not a coincidence.
Yeah, Purdue outscored Michigan State 9-4 in fast break points, which it's not really the 9 that you're worried about from Michigan State's perspective. It's the 4. Right. If you're not getting any fast break offense. Cassius Winston, playmaking situations, he had 7 pass outs out of, like, ball screens and ISOs. Michigan State scored 2 points. He had 6 possessions where he tried to score as on his own, turned it over 3 times, only scored 4 points. Mm-hmm. So they completely shut off the water in those situations too, in a sense where those were the plays where Winston killed Michigan, right? I think he had like 20-something points just out of one-on-one playmaking situations, which is beyond impressive, but it shows how well Purdue executed their ball screen defense and really just defended overall. The turnover number is just jarring, though, to turn over on 30% of your possessions, because we hadn't really been talking a lot about Michigan State turnovers over the last month. We did early on, but if you look in their losses, they have kind of popped up at bad times, right? 25% turnover rate against Virginia Tech, 22% against Kentucky. So when Michigan State loses, that turnover bug creeps back into play.
Yeah, and it's not only Cassius, right? And I mean, this is the worst game Cassius will play this year. But they just got nothing from the guys around him. Aaron Henry, Gabe Brown, Marcus Bingham, 3 starters. They combined for 7 points on 3 for 13 shooting. Thomas Kithier came off the bench. He was a minus 25 in 15 minutes played. He was kind of out of his element in the first half, and I think most people were in agreement that Izzo probably waited a little bit too long to go to Julius Marble instead of Kithier to check Travion Williams. It was kind of too little too late on that. Really the only guys who you kind of left that game not being able to kind of pick apart were basically Marble. Rocket Watts played okay. Foster Lawyer didn't kill him.
So you're supposed to count on those guys at home. If you want your big Gabe Brown game or your big whoever, your role players, even Aaron Henry, on the road, Tillman, Winston need to win games, right? Like, you're counting on your big 2 to win away from home, and all the other guys can play their games at home. I don't know who else on this Michigan State roster, other than Winston and Tillman, you can really count on to show up every game on the road.
But the thing is that
especially
Purdue is
playing a road game.
Purdue's entire game plan was,
as it should be,
was obviously like every other team in the league, based on shutting down Simpson and Tillman, and the difference is that they were executing it where other teams in the league can't or don't or fail to. And on those nights, you can't just pack it in and take a 30-point loss, right? That's essentially what happened yesterday.
So who is the guy who needs to
Aaron Henry needed to have a better game. I mean, the guy goes 1 for 6, scored 3 points, only played 21 minutes because of some foul trouble, but he was kind of a no-show. Hit a good shot in the second half that I really liked because he missed badly on a short jumper on one possession, came back and hit a 3 on the next one. But in the first half, he was just passing up open looks. And it's like, you either need to, a couple quick dribbles, get to the elbow, or take that shot. But when Winston and Tillman are clearly just being taken out of the game, I think that's kind of where an extra instinct from him needs to kick in.
Yeah, that's the place you look, but it's just at this point, I don't think it's surprising that it didn't come in that spot, right? Like it was, and also that was just a brutal spot for Michigan State to go on the road when you're fat and happy, winning all these games at home against the Purdue team that everyone's trying to write off. Just lost a double overtime game. Just lost a game where they scored 37 points, right? Like complete bounce back spot in a tough environment with a great coach, right? Like that's just a brutal all around. It was a scheduling loss for Michigan State, I think, from the beginning.
It's also Purdue does not. First of all, they're pretty. Despite their record, they have 3 wins over ranked teams this year. Like they can go out.
What ranked teams have they beat?
I don't know. This is a note from their game notes.
Oh, well, yeah, they probably counted from like Virginia as a ranked team, even though they're ranked 42nd in Ken Palm now. But
it's their 15th straight home win. Let's see. They're 71. Here's the stat that I was looking for. They're 71-5 at Mackey since the beginning of the 2015-16 season. And Michigan State was favored by 3.
Yeah, by 4, I saw even. But so I guess here's what I would say. Coming away from that game, do you just chalk it up to Purdue played an amazing game? Or do you look at road games coming up for Michigan State as more of an adventure? Because right now the only Big Ten road game Michigan State has played is at Northwestern and at Purdue. So there's a lot of tough road games left on that schedule.
Yeah, no doubt. Their road trips include Indiana, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Nebraska, Maryland, Penn State. There's some losses in there. I still think Michigan State is the favorite to win the league. I think they will win the league, and it'll be in that 14-6 or maybe 15-5 area. I think 15-5 would be really impressive, but that means there's going to be losses, and they're coming. So they have 14 games left. If they lose 5 more. I don't think everyone needs to throw their arms up on every one. It just seems like kind of life in the league,
Yeah. So I think 12 of the Big Ten teams are ranked in the top 38 on Ken Palm. So it's going to be, I really don't know how people will evaluate what like on a national level, what happens over the next 2 months, because you're going to have a lot of 1-1 weeks for these teams, really across the board. You're going to win your game at home. You're going to lose on the road, and it's going to seem like everyone's mediocre, but I don't know how that will be seen nationally. Right.
Yeah.
Because you might have more losses, but more quality wins. Like every team is going to just have a schedule loaded with Q1 games. So that'll be like, you look at Ohio State, they have lost 4 in a row, but are we really do we think they're a bad team now? I don't. Right. So I don't know what to make of it. And Michigan State was the team that before Sunday we would say, okay, they're the one that's going to go 15-5 and kind of run away with this thing. I think playing that poorly on the road when it's your first real road test in the league is telling. Or not telling, but it should be like it's a reminder of how easy the schedule was to start the year. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a reminder that they are going to lose games. Beyond that, I don't like. I was talking to someone after was it the Michigan game maybe, and they're like, man, like, do you think Michigan State could get up to like 17 or 16? Like, is that in play? And I'm like, there is zero chance in hell anyone is winning 17 games in this league this year. Like, to even have that thought is preposterous. I think that is what Sunday was a reminder of. Anyone thinking that this was going to be a cakewalk for Michigan State was out of their mind. I still think it's the favorite. I still think they're the best team in the league. But you know, they're going to take they are not just head and shoulders, you know, so clearly dominant. This is not this is not Greg Oden, Ohio State, like, by any means.
No, I think it's hard to really know what a team is as far as how they'll finish in the league until they've won some road games, right?
True.
Which is why I buy into Wisconsin right now, because they have, but they've also lost a home game. So I don't know what to. I think that we don't know how big the gap is right now until we see, like, if Michigan State were to go and win at Indiana and Minnesota back to back, then all of a sudden I think you would say that really cements their standing in the league standings. But I think they're the favorite, and I think that the number of games that they're probably favored to win the league by is the question, if that makes sense.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, also, I think Michigan State's style of play also lends itself typically against normal team. Again, I say normal because Purdue is kind of what they are, but it lends itself to winning on the road the way Michigan State plays. And I think that they're going to get theirs on the road, more so than most other teams in the league, and that's why they're going to win the league, is because I think this team will figure it out and be okay winning on the road. They went 16-4 in conference road games the last 2 years. Like, this isn't, I think while some teams are more prone to getting overwhelmed on the road, this ain't it. Purdue just is Purdue, you know?
I mean, yeah, I guess we'll see. Purdue also took 2 overtimes to beat Minnesota at home in a game they should have lost twice. How good do you think Purdue?
I'm sorry, but Mackey Arena for Minnesota coming in is not Mackey Arena for Michigan State coming in.
That's fair. It's not like Purdue is a lock to make the NCAA tournament.
No, I would agree.
How many games has Michigan State lost to non-NCAA tournament teams? I know they've lost to what? They lost 3 last year. So that's, I guess, kind of on the resume as a blind spot. But it makes you, like, I don't know. It's hard to balance. Like, so what did Purdue do differently at home against Michigan State than on the road against Michigan? I mean, especially offensively. Just hit some luck box threes.
Xavier Simpson's performance against Purdue was a little bit different than Cassius Winston's performance against Purdue. That is the number one difference.
That's fair.
I mean, Xavier was outstanding in that game.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of Purdue, and because of that, it makes it hard to know what to make of that game, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I also think it was just a game that, put it this way, a lot of the shots that Purdue made in that game, you'd give them all day. In the scouting report, it is to let them take those shots. Evan Boudreau's going to take 5 3-pointers. I'll take it all day, every day, right? He made 3 of them. And it was in the first half. It was very much kind of that avalanche feeling of just like, all right, these guys are just making all these shots. This is a team that typically, what's their effective field goal percentage?
48%, 228th.
Right. So you're talking about a team that can't shoot or score most often. Getting buckets beyond Travion Williams.
So would you chalk up more disappointment from Michigan State's performance on offense or defense? I think that the defense, Purdue's going to hit some shots sometimes, and that sucks. And what are you going to do? But to score 0.7 points per possession is not a pretty number. I think that's the more worrying part of it all.
Yeah,
but I also don't think
it was pretty
Michigan
interesting.
State has the.
I mean, I would be more disappointed in the offense, but that's just how I feel. But
in Michigan State's offense,
yeah. But I mean, they went from 1 to 5 in offensive efficiency nationally after one game. That's how bad they were yesterday. That's like impossible. So at this point in the season, that might be impossible. So that was about as bad as they could actually play.
Yeah, I'm looking back. I was trying to find when they've lost a road game like that, and it seems like the only place they lose badly on the road is Mackey.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it was their worst loss since Michigan ran them at Chrysler, whatever year that was. And if it had gotten over 30, you would be going back to when they lost to North Carolina by like 35 back in 2009 or something.
Mm-hmm.
I think this was a little bit of an outlier.
Yeah, right now it definitely is. Because you look at, like, last year we talked about points in the season when Michigan, like, they lost those 3 games in a row.
Mm-hmm.
But that was 1 10-point loss, an overtime loss, and a 5-point road loss. Their other Big Ten loss was by 1 point on the road at Indiana. So this group has not really gotten blitzed like that very often.
Right.
So
like I'll be really curious to see that Indiana Minnesota back to back.
Don't sleep on with that Wisconsin game. Wisconsin's playing as well as anyone in the Big Ten right now.
I'm just talking road games.
Yeah, really interesting stretch coming up, I would say, without a doubt.
And one game in like
11 days.
11 days?
10 days. Well, 2 games in 11 days. But yeah, they have a long break.
So, all right. Do you have any Big Ten thoughts before we get out of here?
Good luck trying to figure out what's up or down.
10 teams between 3 and 2 and 2 and 3?
I think Wisconsin deserves a lot of credit for winning on the road at Ohio State and Penn State.
Yeah.
All the efficiency margin stats will tell you that they're actually pretty good in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the most disappointing team, the most disappointing effort was probably Maryland scoring 49 points at Iowa on Friday night. That team is just broken offensively.
Mm-hmm.
Last in the league in turnover rate.
Guards are
second to last in what?
Guards are you talking about Ohio State?
No, I'm talking about Maryland.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, that says a lot. But okay.
Your comment could have applied to either, I guess. Ohio State, I don't even know. DJ Carton turning the ball over all the time is not a recipe for success, and I don't think that team has the ceiling. Like, the team needs a good DJ Carton.
Yeah.
And instead, he has 19 turnovers in the last 4 games. And he has never played more than 30 minutes.
Yeah,
that's not good.
Got one taste of the starting lineup and went 4 for 11 on twos with 3 turnovers and a loss to Maryland, and then is promptly taken back out of the starting lineup, which I was kind of surprised. I thought that was it. I thought they were just going to kind of ride him. But I guess when Kyle Young came back to the lineup, he started, and I guess Carton got bumped.
Yeah, 7 turnovers on the road at Assembly Hall. I mean, that's just you can't win like that.
And 4 fouls.
Yeah. So I don't know what to make of them. You have any other Big Ten takes?
Let's look at some upcoming games here. Is there anything that grabs you this week? Maryland, Wisconsin.
Big week for
probably be a big one. That's on Tuesday night. Definitely probably worth watching. Purdue, Maryland next Saturday. Another good one.
I mean, this is a huge week for Maryland. If you got
Michigan
Wisconsin
at
on the
Iowa's an
road,
interesting one too.
yeah, there's a lot of interesting. I mean, it's so hard to try to make sense of who's actually good, right? So if you look at sort of the overall, so Torvik does adjusted efficiency margin in the conference, and the top teams in order are Wisconsin, Michigan State, Illinois, Rutgers, Iowa. Michigan comes in sixth in that list. So that kind of tries to account for how difficult of a schedule teams have played. Illinois is 4-2 and has played the second toughest schedule according to Torvik's numbers. So don't sleep on Illinois, I guess. I mean, they never look particularly inspiring, but
they're alone in second place right now.
They've fixed their defense, and kudos to Underwood for kind of throwing out everything he's done and building a new defense. But like, they're sneaking by right now.
Yeah.
At one point win at Wisconsin is super impressive. A 3-point home win over Rutgers, not all that impressive. I know Rutgers is good, but I don't know. At home, I think Illinois could have played better in that game.
I watched most of that game. It was ugly wall to wall. It was perfect Rutgers basketball. But now Illinois gets a week off, and then they get Northwestern at home, so they're going to be able to get to 5-2 in the league. When everyone else is just taking L's left and right, I mean, they have given themselves some pretty nice padding here for the inevitable 3-game losing streak that's going to come.
Yeah, they were the team that did absolutely nothing in the non-conference. So of all the teams in the league, they have the most to make up. But obviously, there's just so many opportunities that they're starting to make up that ground in a hurry, really, I would say. So they're right in the picture. How are we buying into Rutgers? Is this team making the NCAA tournament? What's your take?
I like them a lot. If I had you put a gun to my head today, is Rutgers going to make the NCAA tournament? I'd still have to go with history and probably say no. Feeling really, really good about my NIT bet. I think this might be your NIT champions right here. But if they don't make the tournament, I mean, they deserve all the credit in the world for what they've done. And they have back-to-back home games here against Indiana, Minnesota. You take care of business at home there, that gets them to 5-2 in the league. Then the conversation starts to get like it's at some point it becomes impossible for them not to make the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I don't think they're at that spot yet, but
right.
They have some legitimate wins, right? Wisconsin, Seton Hall, Penn State. This team, they've done nothing away from home. They have a 17-point win over Nebraska, and that's it. I don't know. They still have to go to Iowa. They have to go to Maryland, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Penn State, and Purdue. And then also play Michigan at Madison Square Garden. So
they have three wins right now over teams that will probably be in the NCAA tournament.
Which is probably 2 more than they've had in a season in a while.
Right.
That might be too harsh, but they usually have one big win over NCAA tournament team, I feel like. But
my question is Wisconsin an NCAA tournament team?
Wisconsin is this is the most perfect Wisconsin season ever. They lose all these games. They just play they take it to a new level of just slow, methodical bully ball, really. And they're just the most miserable team to play in a conference setting. You're not scared to play them necessarily on a neutral floor over Thanksgiving, but they're just miserable to play in a Big Ten gym. And that's basically what they're doing. Although, to be fair, they have the number 2 offense in the league right now at 1.07 points per possession. Micah Potter.
Look at that effective field goal percentage.
Yeah, Micah Potter has made a big difference for this team. He had 24 on the road at Penn State, 13 boards. That really changes, I think, what this team can be in a way that I didn't really buy into early in the season when everyone was talking about his transfer waiver, but he's been impressive and has made a difference. And that's another case where how does the NCAA handle midseason transfers as far as they evaluate a team? If Wisconsin goes and runs through the Big Ten with Potter, do you ignore the fact that they were 5-5 or whatever without him?
Right.
I don't know. I generally find that NCAA rule about evaluating injuries or suspensions is a poor rule. I think you should just evaluate a team based on the resume, but what do I know?
Right. But I tweeted this Saturday morning, and to their credit, they started off with a win. But this stretch of play for Wisconsin, and I know you can go through every Big Ten schedule and find just brutal, ridiculous stretches, but this one seems pretty excessive, what Wisconsin is embarking on. So they got a win at Penn State on Saturday. Tuesday, they are home against Maryland, and then at Michigan State, then a reprieve against Nebraska at home, followed by at Purdue, at Iowa, Michigan State at home. That's dirty.
Every school in the league has a stretch like that. I mean, it doesn't get easier.
I know. I'm just saying, man. I think that's about as bad as you'll find out there. So,
one more Big Ten school I want to hit on.
Yeah,
I'm worried about Penn State.
Uh-oh. I don't like hearing that.
They're tied for 12th in the league in adjusted efficiency margin. Their defense has sort of gone down the drain in league play, almost similar to Michigan in that regard, where
1.1
they're fouling way too much. They're giving up too many easy baskets. They're basically playing this gambling style of defense where they're leading the league in steals, but also giving up a bunch of open threes, a bunch of offensive rebounds, a bunch of free throws. That's not a sustainable strategy. And everyone was feeling really good after they won that shootout over Iowa at the Palestra, but tough week, losing at Rutgers, losing at home pretty significantly to Wisconsin. Now you go to Minnesota, you host Ohio State, you go to Michigan. Things could get real in a hurry there, and I don't know how much margin for error they have despite those big wins over Maryland and Iowa.
That's not good.
You buying into Penn State, or like
I don't know. I would like to see them stop fouling. I can tell you that much. Teams are scoring a quarter of their points in Big Ten play against Michigan State from the foul line. That's ridiculous. What'd I say?
Michigan State.
Sorry, Penn State. Yeah, I don't know. Their numbers in league play, you're right, I'm looking at right now, are just abysmal pretty much across the board, except for steal percentage and block percentage. So congrats on overplaying on defense and having Mike Watkins on your back line. That's about all they have. So, but 10th in offensive efficiency in league play, 13th in defensive efficiency in league play.
Yeah, not good. And those numbers are skewed because they got just ran out of the gym at Ohio State.
True.
Like that was probably the most lopsided game of the Big Ten season, but something to watch. And you get nervous when you look at your KenPom schedule coming up and there's 3 straight L's in terms of the projection. Yeah. And you're already on a 2-game losing streak.
Yeah, I mean, it's really disconcerting. And I know Wisconsin makes you play ugly and all that, but scoring 49 points at home can't happen. That can't happen.
It did.
It did. 12 for 31 on twos, 5 for 21 on threes, 10 turnovers, 0.79 points per possession in your own barn. Woof. So, I don't know. They're definitely a team that no one wants to play. But you're right. If this thing's going to go sideways, it looks like this is the point it's going to happen. So, need to make it through the stretch. They go to the barn on Wednesday. That's probably a loss. And then Ohio State at home, who they already beat. Then Michigan on the road. So,
no, they lost to Ohio State by
That's what I meant. I'm sorry.
32 points.
They lost.
They didn't already beat them.
That's what I meant.
Furthest thing from it.
So
and Ohio State is in we got to get this shit back on track mode. Ohio State is going to have to just blow out Nebraska on Tuesday.
I can't believe they played as poorly as they did against Indiana.
Well, yeah, I mean, they need to figure something out in a hurry.
I don't know if I'm crazy. There's something to me. There's something vastly different between a 3-game losing streak and a 4-game losing streak, if that makes sense. It's like, I feel like a 3-game losing streak happens in a season, but like good teams don't lose 4 games in a row. Am I just pulling that out of my ass? Probably, but
probably. I look at it like this. They were another team where you're only as good as where you're playing, and they sort of got gassed up on a stretch that was not all that difficult, really like attainable difficult wins, right? Like home against Villanova. That's like a good spot for a big win. At UNC with some injuries. I mean, that was a great win, but UNC now we see is not all that good. Then they won that Kentucky game, again, on a neutral. And now they're just playing West Virginia, miserable. Wisconsin, miserable. Maryland, really good defensively. Right? So there's no game in there that you say, wow, I can't believe they lost that game. Even if they're a top 10 team. 3 road losses, a neutral to a top 10 team in Wisconsin at home. I mean, those aren't any, you don't say, oh, those are guaranteed wins, any of those. Right, like they don't have a bad loss.
No, that's true. The thing is that they don't have any bad losses, but they've played so badly. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, they've scored less than 60 points 4 games in a row.
The crazy thing is that in conference play, they're the top 3-point shooting team in the league.
Yeah, well,
but they're only shooting 34%. Like the 3-point shooting in the Big Ten is insanely horrible in league play. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 8 teams in the league shooting under 30% on threes in league games.
There's a lot of good defenses in the league.
That's like high school basketball stats.
You would think that being second in the conference in 3-point volume and first in 3-point accuracy would be the recipe of a great offense, not the number 6 offense in the league. Mm-hmm. Although I also think, how many threes did they hit against Penn State? 14. So that game skews some of their stats, I would say, because have they shot that well from 3?
Probably not. I mean, they've only made
not as poorly though.
They've made 41 threes in league play, so 14 came in one game.
They've turned the ball over on at least 20% of possessions for 6 games in a row. That's not good. And that's especially troubling when you're supposed to be a team that has 2 point guards that you think are good.
Here's a for what it's worth, the top 3 teams in 3-point shooting in league play are also the 12th, 13th, and 14th place teams in the conference. Ohio State, Northwestern, Nebraska.
The difference between standings is just very. Every team is right in there with 2 or 3 losses.
That's interesting. I mean, if we're sitting here reading stats at the end of the podcast,
maybe we should just wrap this podcast up. People are probably tired of it all.
Go to hell. All right. So that'll do it for this week. Subscribe to The Athletic. Subscribe to Hoop. Subscribe to this podcast. Leave a review if you'd be so kind. That'll do it for this week. We will be back soon. Until then, be sure to tip your bartenders and servers.